Jai Hind, dear children. Today we are going to start a new chapter in economics. Which is that chapter? Yes, your second chapter. Sectors of the Indian economy. So, today we are going to study in detail about your second chapter, sectors of the Indian economy. So, before going directly into the topic, first we want to know what is an economy? What is the meaning of the term economy? What is an economy? The state of a country or a region in terms of the production and consumption of goods and services and the supply of money. It is termed as a economy. So, what is an economy? The state of a country or region in terms of the production and consumption of goods and services and the supply of money is termed as a economy. Related to our topic, we want to know the meaning of another term, that is economic activity. What is an economic activity? It is an activity of providing, making, buying, or selling commodities or services by people to satisfy day-to-day needs of life. An economic activity includes manufacturing, distributing, or utilizing products or services. So, what is an economic activity? It is an activity of providing, making, buying, or selling commodities or services by people to satisfy day-to-day needs of life. And at the same time, an economic activity includes manufacturing, distributing, or utilizing products or services. Another important term related to this chapter is sectors. So, what are sectors? An area of an economy or a part of an economy that includes certain kinds of jobs. So, another term, what are sectors? What are sectors? An area of an economy or a part of an economy that includes certain kinds of jobs. So, related to the sector in Indian economy, we are having three sectors. And in this chapter, we want to study the in-depth knowledge about all the three main sectors of our Indian economy. In our chapter, sectors of Indian economy, economy is divided into three main economic activities or three main sectors. They are primary activity, secondary activity, and tertiary activity, or primary sector, secondary sector, and tertiary sector. So now we are going to study in detail about the primary sector. What are primary sectors or what are primary activities? When we produce goods by exploiting natural resources, we can call it as primary activity or primary sector. For example, agriculture, mining, forestry, fishing, all these are examples of primary activity. So once again, what is a primary activity? When we produce a good by exploiting natural resources, we can call it as primary activity or primary sector. Now we are going to study some of the important features of primary sector. Primary sector is always considered as the basic sector because it provides basic needs to all other products that we subsequently make. So, primary sector is otherwise known as basic sector because it provides basic needs to all other products that we subsequently make. Our country's economic growth starts with this primary sector. So, primary sector gives a lot of importance to the economic growth of our Indian economy. Primary sector is always related to natural activities like fishing, forestry, mining, animal rearing, milk production, and various types of agriculture related activities like pisciculture, horticulture, sericulture. So as a result of all these activities, primary sector is otherwise known as agriculture related sector. So why primary sector is otherwise known as agriculture related sector? Because all its activities are related to nature and they are giving a lot of importance to natural related activities. So it is otherwise, that means primary sector is otherwise known as agriculture related sector. In primary sector, we obtain value or money by selling the products we produce as a result of natural activities. In this way, economic growth started by primary sector in our country. So once again, in primary sector, we obtain value or money by selling the products we produce as a result of natural activities. In this way, economic growth started by primary sector in our country. Primary sector contributes more than 20% to GDP in India. So you will study in detail about this GDP in your coming sections. So this primary sector, they are contributing 20% to the GDP in India, and at the same time its employment share is more than 55%. As primary sector contributes 55% of employment to our Indian economy, it is considered as the most laboring sector of our Indian economy. So which is the most laboring sector of our Indian economy? Primary sector, because it contributes around 55% of our employment in our Indian economy. The primary sector tends to make up a larger portion of the economy in developing countries than it does in developed countries. So, the primary sector tends to make up a larger portion of economy in developing countries than it does in developed countries. So, just have a recall about primary sector. So, what is a primary sector? When we produce a good by exploiting natural resources, we can call it as a primary sector or primary activity. For example, fishing, agriculture, forestry. Primary sector is always considered as the basic sector because it provides basic needs to all other products. Our country's economic growth starts with this primary sector. And primary sector is always related to natural activities also, like fishing, forestry, mining, animal rearing, milk production, like that. So it is otherwise known as agriculture related sector. Primary sector otherwise known as agriculture related sector. And this primary sector, it contributes 20% to GDP in India, and it contributes 55% to employment share in our Indian economy. So as it contributes 55% to employment share, it is considered as the most laboring sector of our Indian economy. And this primary sector, it tends to make up a larger portion of the economy in developing countries than it does in developed countries. There is a deep relationship between primary sector and secondary sector because the primary sector of an economy removes or harvests products directly from the earth in order to produce raw materials of food. And it is the secondary sector that takes raw materials from the primary sector and manufactures them into goods. So, from this we can understand that with the help of secondary sector, the primary sector, they can make use of whatever products they can produce with the help of nature. So now we are going to study about secondary sector. So what is a secondary sector? Secondary sector covers activities in which primary goods are used to produce some commodity. For example, paper from wood, bread from wheat, nails and steel bars made from iron. So what is the secondary sector? Secondary sector are those sectors which covers activities in which primary goods are used to produce some commodity. So once again, secondary sector are those sectors which covers activities in which primary goods are used to produce some commodities. For example, paper from wood, bread from wheat, nails and steel bars made from iron. Secondary sector is also called as industrial sector or manufacturing sector. Why? Because the secondary sector is mostly associated with the industries in all its activities. So, we already studied that primary sector is otherwise known as agriculture related sector because most of its activity is related to nature, and so it is called as agriculture related sector. In the same way, secondary sector is otherwise called as industrial sector or manufacturing sector because all the activities of secondary sector are associated with industries. Secondary sector contributes more than 20% of GDP in India, and it provides employment, that means 24.3% employment to people. So compared to this primary sector, the GDP provided by the secondary sector is very low. At the same time, employment opportunities of the secondary sector is also decreasing nowadays. The secondary sector forms a substantial part of GDP as it creates value goods and it is the engine of economic growth and is crucial for all developed economies, although the trend in most developed countries is the predominant. So the secondary sector, it forms a substantial part of GDP. Why? Because it creates value goods and it is the engine of economic growth. And it's also crucial for all developed economies, although the trend in most developed countries is the predominant. In secondary sector, human activities transform raw materials into usable products, which is mostly done in industries. So it is called as industrial sector. So in secondary sector, human activities transform raw materials into usable products, which is mostly done in industries. And the secondary sector promotes the development of the primary and tertiary sectors. So the secondary sector, it gives a lot of development to the primary and tertiary sectors with the help of its activities in industries. So, the secondary sector is otherwise known as industrial sector. The third one in the economic activity, that means the third sector in the economic activity is the tertiary sector. It is a segment of the economy that provides services to its consumers, including a wide range of businesses such as financial institutions, schools. And this tertiary sector, it is an aid to primary and secondary sector. So the third main important sector in the economic activity is the tertiary sector. It is a segment of the economy that provides service to its consumers, including a wide range of businesses such as financial institutions, schools, and it also provides an aid to primary and secondary sector. The activities of tertiary sector generate services rather than goods. So it is also called service sector. It includes some essential services that may not directly help in the production of goods. So the activities of tertiary sector generate services rather than goods. So it is also called service sector. And this tertiary sector, it includes some essential services that may not directly help in the production of goods. The tertiary sector creates a huge area of employment even for uneducated and unskilled workers. So, the tertiary sector is helpful for the illiterate and the non-professional workers also, because the uneducated and unskilled people in the world, they also got a job in this tertiary sector or service sector. The tertiary sector or service sector also plays a vital role in the development of primary and secondary sector. The share of GDP in tertiary sector is growing also day by day. So, the tertiary sector or service sector, it plays a vital role in the development of the other two sectors, that means primary and secondary sector. And in the area of GDP also, it helps our Indian economy, because the GDP of this tertiary sector is increasing or growing day by day. Basic amenities like education, healthcare services related with information technology, ATM booths, call centers provide employment to educated Indians in this tertiary sector. And also, due to change of economic policies, tertiary sector is growing in India. So, the tertiary sector, apart from the uneducated and these unskilled professionals, they are also giving education to the educated Indians in India with the help of basic amenities like education, healthcare services related with information technology, ATM booths, call centers, and the new economic policies also led to a growth of development in a tertiary sector. The tertiary sector service sector covers a wide array of activities ranging from services provided by most sophisticated sectors like the telecommunication, civil aviation, tourism, real estate, social and personal services, internet cafe, ATM booths, call centers, software companies, etc. So, this tertiary sector or service sector, they are covering a wide array of activities ranging from services provided by most of the sophisticated sectors like telecommunication, civil aviation, tourism, real estate, social and personal services, internet cafe, ATM booths, call centers, and software companies. So, in short, we can say that in order to have a development in the economic status of our country, the development of three sectors are very important and they are interrelated also. In the first section of the chapter, Sectors of Indian Economy, we study about the characteristic features or the main features of the three sectors. That is primary sector, otherwise known as agriculture related sector, secondary sector, otherwise known as industry related sector, and tertiary sector, otherwise known as a service related sector. So now we are moving to another area or another topic in this chapter, which is that is comparing the three sectors of Indian economy and also about GDP, gross domestic product. So in this area, we are just going to study how we want to compare the three sectors and what is the importance of GDP, gross domestic product, how we can calculate this GDP and how the GDP is related to Indian economy. Economy in India consists of three sectors. They are primary, secondary and tertiary. Then how to compare our economy with other countries' economy? It's very difficult to do it, isn't it? So how we can perform this difficult task to compare our economy? So in order to know which sector is producing more volume of goods and services, we want to undertake a new task, because in an economy there could be one or more sectors which are dominant in terms of total production and employment, while other sectors are relatively small in size. Therefore, comparison can be done among these three sectors on the basis of value of final goods and services produced. But the problem is that product can be having variations at the same time. We cannot compare the product in all the times. Then how to count and how to compare this variety of products? So in order to compare, we want to take the value of products, not the number of products. That means we don't want to count how much a particular industry produce goods in a particular year. But we want to compare and count the value, that means money, they are getting in a particular year by selling the product. The value of final goods and services produced in each sector during a particular year provides the total production of the sector for that year. That means if we are counting the how much a particular industry is just getting, how much money they are getting by producing goods and services in a particular year, from that we can understand whether the country is developing or not. So the sum total of production in the three sectors gives what we called GDP, or gross domestic product of a country. So now we are going to study an important concept in economics, which is that GDP, or gross domestic product. So what is GDP? GDP, or gross domestic product, is a monetary measure of the value of all final goods and services produced in a period. That means in a particular year. So it is a monetary measurement of the value of all final goods and services produced in a particular period. Nominal GDP estimates are commonly used to determine the economic performance of a whole country or region and to make international comparison also. So, for making comparisons related to different countries on the basis of economic growth, the measurement of GDP is very important. GDP is important because it gives information about the size of the economy and how an economy is performing. The growth rate of GDP is often used as an indicator of the general health of the economy. GDP measures the total market value, that means gross, of all domestic goods and services produced in a given year. So what is GDP, or how it measures? The GDP, or the gross domestic product, it measures the total market value, that is known as gross, of all US domestic goods and services produced in a given year. When compared with prior periods, GDP tells us whether the economy is expanding by producing more goods and services. That means when we compare the GDP with different periods or different years, we can understand whether the economy of a country is expanding, that means developing, or not. GDP rate indicates how quickly or how slowly the economy is growing or shrinking. So once more, GDP rate indicates how quickly or how slowly the economy is growing or shrinking. GDP is an accurate indicator of the size of an economy, and the GDP growth rate is probably the single best indicator of economic growth. So GDP, it is an accurate indicator of the size of the economy, and the GDP growth rate is probably the single best indicator of economic growth. For the production of a particular product, two types of goods are there. One is intermediate goods and another one we can call it as capital goods. So what is an intermediate good? An intermediate good is a product used to produce a final good or finished product, also referred to as consumer goods. And in economy, while calculating the GDP, we want to take the value of only the capital goods or the final goods and not the value of intermediate goods. Because in the value of capital goods or finished goods, the value of intermediate goods were also included. So, what is the difference between these intermediate goods and capital goods? the goods or the items that we are used for producing a product in the beginning. For example, for producing biscuits, we are in need of wheat, flour, then milk, butter. All these are intermediate goods, and the final product is a biscuit. So, there is a difference between intermediate goods and final goods. So, while calculating GDP, if we are calculating the intermediate goods and the final goods or capital goods, so what will happen? So, if we count these two, that means intermediate goods and capital goods, it leads to double counting, isn't it? Because we are counting the same items two times, because their value is already reflected in the value of the final good, because intermediate goods value are all already reflected in the value of the final good. So no need of counting the intermediate goods while calculating GDP. While calculating GDP, we want to count only the capital goods or the finished goods. In India, the mammoth task of measuring or counting GDP is undertaken by the central government ministry, mainly the Central Statistical Office. GDP is calculated in every 3 months in India, and the figures of GDP depend on the production of rate of major economic sectors. So, once again, the mammoth task of measuring or counting GDP is undertaken by the central government ministry, especially the Central Statistical Office. Another topic related to the sector of Indian economy is the historical changes in sectors. That means they are highlighting the development of change from primary to secondary and from secondary to tertiary sector. So here we want to have a detailed study about the historical changes that took place in the three sectors of economy. Many developed countries have a history of initial stages of development from primary sector itself. That means in these developed countries, primary sector was the most important sector of economic activity. Historical changes have been taken place in primary sector as the methods of farming changed and agriculture sector began to prosper. It produced much more food than before by using of green revolution, that means HYV seeds, chemical fertilizers, pesticides, insecticides, all that. Many people could now take up other activities as primary sector plays a leading role in the beginning of economy. As economy grows with excess production, it leads to technological improvement and development of factories or industries. With the help of excess production, they led to the development of technology and it led to the development of factories of industries. As a result, there arose a shift from primary sector to secondary sector. When secondary sector becomes the most important in total production and employment, grows with the help of primary sector. Therefore, there arose a mutual development in these two sectors, and in order to help them, we want to make use of another sector in the past 100 years, which is that, it is a tertiary sector or service sector. That means a shift arose from primary to secondary, and from secondary it moves towards a tertiary sector, service sector. So primary and secondary, they are producing goods, and tertiary want to help them in the production process. So the tertiary also becoming a lot of important during this period. All these changes happen with technological development, and it enables less labor to be needed in the primary sector and allows more workers to produce manufactured goods. Then further development enables the growth of service sector and leisure activities. Next, we want to study total production and employment in the three sectors in India. A study about all these. What is total production? The volume of total production refers to the output manufactured by the enterprise. Enterprise means industries during a year. So what is total production? The volume of total production refers to the output manufactured by the enterprise during a year. Most of the people of our country are employed in primary sector. It is because not enough job opportunities have been created in a tertiary sector. At the same time, industrial production of goods went up by more than 9 times during the period. But the employment in the industry went up only 3 times. So, as a result of all these, we can understand that more labor are engaged in primary, but their contribution to economy, that means contribution to our Indian economy, is very less. Next topic we want to study related to the chapter sectors of Indian economy is the primary, secondary and tertiary sectors in India. That means already we are studying these three sectors in our Indian economy. But here we want to study with the help of graphical representation the contribution of GDP in these three sectors in between 40 years. That is the main topic we want to study related to this area. Here is a graphical representation showing the production of goods and services in three sectors. In this graph, we can see a comparison of years between 1973-74 and 2013-14 in three sectors of economy. This graph also shows the increasing trend of production of goods and services over the past 40 years. That means when we compare the graph with three sectors in these years, in 1973-74, the primary sector plays a vital role and high position in the production of goods and services. Then only came the secondary, then the tertiary sector. But in 2013-14, there arose a dramatic change because in the place of, or a drastic change in the place of primary sector related to tertiary sector, because the topmost sector is the tertiary sector in the production of goods and services in 2013-14. But this does not mean that the primary sector is having a decreasing trend. In primary sector also we can see an increase. But when we compare it with other two sectors' growth, it is very less. So, from this we can understand that there is a tremendous growth in the tertiary sector. So now we want to have a detailed study about the reasons that led to the rising importance of tertiary sector in production in the recent years. There are four main reasons that led to the rising growth of tertiary sector compared to the other two sectors in the field of production. So now we are going to study in detail one by one the reasons that led to the growth of tertiary sector in India. The first main reason that led to the growth of tertiary sector is that our country gives a lot of importance to the basic services and the government is responsible to provide them to the people. So what is a basic service and why the government is providing them and how the government is providing them? All we want to study in this first reason. So the first reason, in the first reason, it says that our country provide some services to the public which were considered as basic services such as hospitals, police stations, education institutions, transportation, post and telegram services, courts, municipal corporation offices, village administrative offices, banks, defense, insurance companies, etc. These services are providing basic needs to the people, or they help in providing basic needs to the population. So it is known as basic services and the government is liable to provide them to the people. That means the government is responsible to provide all these basic services to the people and the government is ready to provide all these services also. So when government invest in these basic services, they will invest a lot. And it led to the tremendous growth and development of this basic sector or tertiary sector. So with the help of this basic sector and with the help of this government in our country, by providing investment in these basic services, we should have a tremendous rising growth in this tertiary sector. The second reason is that when development arose in agriculture and industry, it leads to the development of various services such as trade, transport, storage, etc. Because when we have a growth in agriculture sector, for example, the use of green revolution with the help of HIV seeds, chemical fertilizers, chemical pesticide, insecticides, it leads to high yield. As a result, we want to make use of transportation and storage facilities. From this, we can understand that when primary and secondary sector grows, it always leads to the growth of a tertiary sector. The third reason is that when there is a rise of income level, certain section of people start demanding many more services in their life. For example, as our economic status develop, we want to have all type of luxuries in our life, like going to tourist places, educating our children in private schools. Mainly a privatization happen in our life, making use of telecommunications, and all these services were included in the tertiary sector, and it led to the development of a tertiary sector. The fourth reason that led to the development and growth of tertiary sector is that over a period of time and so on, several new services emerged in our country, such as information and communication technology. The production of these services has been rising rapidly. As time changes, new services came and it has a rapid growth, and this rapid growth led to the development of economy not only in India but also in the world. So, with the rise of information and communication technology in India, it helped to have a lot of foreign exchange in our country. So, in short, the development of basic services, agriculture and industry, rise of income level of the people, and growth of information technology led to the rising growth of tertiary sector in India. Apart from all these merits, there are some disparities in this tertiary sector. It is that some services like information and communication technology led a lot of development and growth to this service sector or tertiary sector. But all the areas of tertiary sector is not developed and it is not contributing a lot to GDP. For example, some services like labors, mainly these hired labors or there's a daily wage labors, also come under this tertiary sector, but it does not produce that much development that the IT sector, that means information communication, that area provides to tertiary sector. So the rising importance of tertiary sector is having some merits. At the same time, some dark side is also there related to this tertiary sector. My dears, please watch this video very carefully and copy down the important points. After that, read your textbook 3 or 4 times. Okay, thank you.